Good morning, church. The scripture today is from Micah 6 through 8. How can I stand up before God and show proper respect to the high God? Should I bring an armload of offerings topped with yearling calves? Would God be impressed with 1,000 rams, with buckets of barrels of olive oil? Would he be moved if I sacrificed my firstborn child, my precious baby, to cancel my sin? But he's already made it plain how to live, what to do, what God is looking for in men and women. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love, and don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. Attention, God calls out to the city. If you know what's good for you, you'll listen. So listen, all of you. This is serious business. So I just wanted to play a song for you guys that was just a song that really got me through hard times, and it was just a nice reminder of God's endless love for us. And so I just hope that some of you will at least be able to relate with it and that you guys can enjoy it. When I walk through deep waters, I know that you will be with me. When I'm standing in the fire, I will not be overcome. And through the valley of the shadows, I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me. In the midst of deep sorrows, I see your light is breaking through. And the dark of night will not overtake me. I am pressing into you. And Lord, you fight my every battle, so I will not fear. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me. You amaze me, redeem me, and you call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me, and you call me as your own. You amaze me, redeem me, and you call me as your own. You're my strength, you're my defender, you're my refuge in the storm. And through these trials, you've always been faithful. You bring healing to my soul. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me. I am not alone. I am not alone. You will go before me, and you will never leave me.
We're going to do a little set change here. Come on up, Thomas. Thomas McBurney IV. Doesn't that sound like a pastor's name? He should be the pastor. He is a teacher in San Francisco and is a member of Bethany United Methodist Church there. He's also on trustees, so I just found that out about him. We're going to do things a little differently. We're going to talk about our trip to the Philippines, and here's why. I could give you a sermon on it, which would be good. It'd be amazing. Let's just be honest. No, I'm kidding. It was a joke. You guys were supposed to laugh. Thank you. But I think you think pastors do things that people can't do. And so I wanted Thomas here as a person who is a teacher and has a life and has his own responsibilities. So I want to give you a little background information. The United Methodist Church has a special relationship with the church in the Philippines. One, we have a lot of Methodist pastors there. But Thomas and I enter into this in a different way. Neither of us are Filipino. We didn't grow up there, and this was both of our first trips there. And so entering into it a little differently than some of you who are maybe sitting there who grew up there and who still have family there, and the De La Cruzes are headed there as we speak. And so if I misspeak or Thomas misspeaks, I would appreciate it if you would correct us. Tell us that we did something wrong or we got something wrong from your perspective. Because we're just beginning to enter into this movement. So the United Methodist Church has a relationship with the Philippines because the Philippines has been an epicenter for human rights violations for a long period of time. And so the Methodist Church has often lent itself as cover so that people there wouldn't be hurt. Bishop Shimona in the late 1990s asked a group of pastors to go back and to hear the stories of human rights violations that were happening there. And so it became as the Filipino Solidarity Task Force in the California-Nevada Annual Conference. That's a title, right? And you know what I love about being a United Methodist is that we don't understand mission as just handing out food. While that's important, what's more important is relationship, right? Because relationships is what changes lives on both sides. And often what churches have gotten wrong is that mission means that I am the person who knows it all and I am helping you. Anybody who's ever participated in any type of mission trip knows that you are changed as the giver as well, right? So I could tell you about my experience about the Philippines, but I also wanted you all to hear Thomas's experience from the Philippines. Because I'm hoping, and I'm actually praying, that 2 or 3 of you will go next year. Her eyes went, bug out, what? I'm praying for that. Because who we are here is informed by what we know about there. For those of us that are the non-Filipinos, we've sat in this church for years. And how much do we really know about our Filipino brothers and sisters and their experiences there? So Bishop Shimona set up this relationship, and it has continued through Bishop Brown and now through Bishop Carcaño. And it's not handing out food. It is not that type of relationship. So what we were doing is that we flew into Manila, stayed at the National Council of Churches, which was a cultural adjustment. Yes? Yes, okay. So it was a cultural adjustment a little bit in that. And then we were given a guide who became our Mama M, who Mama M works for National Council of Churches, and his name is really Emmanuel, but he called M. His nickname is M. But he took care of us so much, we just started calling him Mama. Because he says, don't eat that off the street, eat this. pack your clothes like this. Make sure, just somebody who knows what's happening. And he is 21. He would turn 22. He turned 22 while we were there. He's a young guy. But M has a heart for social justice and for the people. He was actually arrested and detained because he was protesting for free education for all. And so he was arrested, and he had Filipino flags that he was holding. Were they Filipino flags? And the police officers took them and shoved him down his throat to make him choke on his words. It was actually because of the relationship that M had with National Council of Churches why he was released. Otherwise, he would have disappeared, and we would never have seen him again. So M leads people with National Council of Churches. And so he was our guide. And then we went to, will you show some of those? Thanks. This is us in the Buffalo region. This is how many volunteers were there. And this is at what they call the training center. And what it is a regional house that farmers have built so that they can come together and learn techniques for farming, or they can host a crazy bunch of people who are going to stay there. And it's like a community center. And we went to the Buffalo region, which is in southern Mindanao, which is primarily a Muslim area in the country. And the reason we were there is 30 years ago, the president said, hey, there's all this land. You guys can move here. So people moved there and started farming. That's a bridge, you guys. That's what, do you see that bridge? I crossed that bridge with heavy packs on. I swear, I was like, what is the weight capacity on this? Because these Filipino people are way smaller than me, and I'm on that bridge. I was seriously worried about it. Look at that. Yeah. I was take a picture and keep going. I did not want to mess with. You notice I wasn't right in the middle, right? So we went to this region because the human rights violations that were happening there, the farmers, so technically the land is owned by the university, Southern Mindanao University. Central. Thank you, Thomas. Someone's been paying attention. The Central Mindanao University. And they are experiencing budget cuts, as we know here, right? Colleges don't have enough money for the students. And so they started leasing out the land to Dole and Del Monte. And Dole and Del Monte are now farming bananas, right? And what?
Cassava.
Oh, cassava. Thank you. They're farming that there. So the school technically has, I had to do the conversion in acres, 7,500 acres. The farmers want to farm 740 acres, but they're not being allowed to farm that because it's good land. And so it's reserved for Del and Del Monte. And so the farmer said, look, this is the only bit of land that we want, and we were invited to stay here. So they took them to court, and they won. And then the university appealed, and they still won. It got all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they lost on a technicality because they didn't respond in the 15-day time. And so the university won the case. And so what happened was there started to be fights. The security guards would come out to the farmers and steal their equipment and shoot warning shots, but people would end up dead. They would steal their equipment or damage it so they wouldn't be able to farm. And the farmers just didn't know what to do. They'd hear a gunshot and they'd run away. And then they said, we have to do something about this. We're starving. My shirt says, rice, not bullets. They were starving. And they had no recourse until they came together as a community and said, you know what? Our strongest resource is ourselves. They realized that if the university fought with the farmers, the male farmers, it was the university against the farmer. If the security guard got into an interaction, it would be the security guard against the farmer. But the women realized, if they were in between their husbands and the university didn't want the bad press of a security guard beating up a woman. So the university wouldn't help the security guard. So the women have now been on the front lines voluntarily. They say, this is what we can do for our families and for our children and for our husbands. And so instead of running away like they used to when they heard the gunshots, they now run to the field. And what they tell the men step back immediately, and the women come forward. And the women say, listen, they bring their children. This is my baby, and I just want to feed them. Can you just let us farm this much land so that we can feed our families? I know you're just doing your job, and I know you probably have a family that you want to feed. So can we just farm this little bit of land? So for over the next 2 years, Over the next 2 years, they have been able to farm the land and have been able to feed their families. Nothing has settled in the court yet, but what they realized is that the security guards were put in the middle of this too, that it wasn't their fault that it was in this situation. So, Thomas, I want to ask you, what was your overarching impression of the trip?
That's such a big question.
Okay, you can take that in any direction you want to go.
I've given a few messages at different churches, and I had 3 main points. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from the Philippines was community. Kim is talking about M, and we called him Mama M because he took care of us. And we were kind of like a little family. I was the only non-pastor, so it was me and Kim, my pastor, Sadie, Pastor Janelle, and Pastor John. And it was a very unique experience, I have to tell you. I don't know if there's any ministers in the crowd, but it was very interesting traveling with just ministers. But the community that exists in the Philippines is exceptionally powerful. M created a little family with us, and everywhere we went, he was giving us a history lesson. We'd be riding in the bus for hours because traffic in the Philippines is absurd. In Manila, there's people just standing in the street selling things, and you're just in traffic we'd be trying to go maybe 15 miles. It would take us 3 or 4 hours.
Are you laughing because of a similar experience in Nigeria? Yeah, I've seen that YouTube video of no traffic lights in Nigeria and people going through that. I know that. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
But just the power of being in community with one another that I personally don't experience a lot here in the United States. I experience it at my church, and sometimes at work. I'm a teacher, so sometimes at work, but it doesn't happen in a systemic way here in the States and in the Philippines. It's part of life. When I was in the Buffalo, Tamara, Limas communities, I was in Limas, and the women would prepare the food, so women from all over the community would bring the necessary, dishes and food, and they would cook all of this food for us Americans, and we would eat, and they would serve us food, and they'd bring out the furniture, and they would wait to eat, and their children would wait to eat, and it was a very humbling experience to know that was so ingrained in part of who they are, that their guests or visitors should come before them, and that's not something that I personally experience in my day-to-day life here. So that was one of the biggest things that I took away.
What'd you understand differently about God?
Your pastor's very good at being a pastor, I have to tell you. Throughout our entire journey, we were buddies, so we checked in.
This was basically so someone didn't get left behind. While we like each other, it wasn't like, hey, buddy. It was like, don't forget somebody in a location. So we were travel buddies, companions.
Well, and one of the other really important parts of it was that they discovered over the years that it's really emotionally taxing to go on a journey like this. Because we are Americans, we have a significant amount of privilege in our existence here. And going on this journey, Kim was very good at checking in with me. I remember we were sitting at the resort, and I use resort very loosely, for the International Conference for People's Rights of the Philippines and the International Conference for Human Rights in the Philippines. and we were sitting in the pool, and we were dangling our feet in the water. And she was like, so how are you doing? And how's it going? And I have to tell you, I think the most I saw of God was in Kim. And I'm really glad I get to share this with her church, because she just kind of checked in with me and was making sure that I was feeling okay. And it was there all throughout the Philippines, and I saw God at work in what we were doing. But for me personally, I saw it mostly in you.
Wow.
Because
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Because she wanted to make sure that I was happy, and I'm a white man, if you can tell. And we were sitting up one night, and we stayed up, me and Kim and John and Janelle. We stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were talking about race and the injustices and oppression that are existing in the world because of what we were experiencing and witnessing in the Philippines, and it was very powerful for me. So that's one of the ways that I feel like God was inspiring us to have these conversations, because of what we were witnessing and experiencing.
Thank you.
Sure.
What did you learn about justice, economics, and poverty during your time in the Philippines?
I feel like this is an interview. Justice, economics, and poverty.
You want to see what?
The what?
Oh, the press. We did hold a press conference while we were there.
That
One
went
of the
on
things,
forever.
Yeah. So part of what we did was after we were in the communities living with people, we left and put on a press conference to talk about the injustice that people experienced, and then expressed our experience with that and shared it. This is, as we marched on Sona, that is one of the bishops in the Philippines. So first we were in the community, then we went to the press conference, had the press conference, then we went to a conference on international people's rights, and then we marched on Sona, which is the State of the Nation that the president holds every year. There you go.
Mama M, the picture's gone.
Go
Mama
back.
M was on the top left.
The guy in the back,
Far left
the
with
one
the
who's not
sunglasses.
wearing a collar, and the one that is not Thomas. and then go to the next one. This moment for me was like it was a moment of solidarity, because when we got off the plane, we flew from Manila to Mindanao and then back. And when we got back to Manila, I kept saying, what are all these, like an igloo cooler, like you take fishing or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Nobody else? Really? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, okay, thank you. I'm like, otherwise I'm going to spend a couple minutes telling you what it is. And people had packed, I said, what are all these igloo coolers coming from? We didn't realize it was people who were coming for the State of the Nation. And we're headed there, but couldn't afford food while they were there. And there was just busloads and busloads of people. And how many people did you say were marching?
I think there were about 30,000 people, which is the greatest number they had ever had.
30,000 people from around the country. And we can't get people to go down to the fire station and vote, 30,000 people. And
walking by foot from Mindanao.
And so we are in line by your group, and all of a sudden you hear, and we're like, what is that? And it's just surrounding you. And I turn, and next to us in line were about 500 people running in flip-flops because they were trying to get into the parade. These people had traveled for 3 or 4 days in, think of Old Navy flip-flops to be there to express their hope for their country and their lives and their families. And I was moved by how much people, I think in the United States we can feel apathetic. Or with our election now, a lot of people say, I don't like him and I don't like her and I'm just not going to vote. But for people to say, I don't like him and I don't like her and that's why I need to show up. And these people showed up. And peace talks, I didn't know that the Philippines is in a civil war and is in the longest civil war anywhere on the planet, 30 years. And people are being held captive. And so the political prisoners, they are very close to being released so that the peace talks can resume between these two, between the government and the people who are fighting for that. So it was hot. I mean, it was like, I think it was like 100 that day with 30,000 people surrounded by concrete. It was miserable. And I look over and I said to Thomas, do you remember this? It's hot and we've stopped and we're as close as we can get to where the president is. And there's just people who are sitting on the ground. And there's a man holding his child who looked to be about 8 years old. You know, do you remember?
His feet.
And the man, the asphalt at this point is burning, you know, because it's so hot. And so the man is trying to sit on the asphalt holding an 8-year-old boy with long legs, you know, but also trying to make sure his son's skin isn't burned by the asphalt. So he's just like gathering all pieces of him, you know, just trying to each second, because the boy is exhausted. He's just passed out, exhausted. And the dad is just grabbing him up. And I look over and I'm watching this really human exchange that any of us would try to do for our children as they're exhausted and worn out and you're just trying to keep them comfortable. And then I looked at the boy's feet and they were black with dirt and mud, and just, I had never seen feet that looked like that. And then I thought, I wondered where they came from. How far was it? How many days did they travel? Did their mother worry when they left? Did she cry? Did she know if they would never come home? But they thought it was important enough for their child to be there. That's the type of hope. That's the type of dignity. That's the type of understanding in which I begin to understand God's respect for those when he says, the least of these. And then what is my responsibility as one of those who has the most to those who have the least? My understanding of God being there for the downtrodden and those who have none, and those who are weak and don't have resources except their own 2 feet and their heart and their family. But no matter what we have, we're trying to always make a better life for our children. I was really touched by that. And I learned that the people and the church, in particular the United Methodist Church, is fighting for those people. I'm going to ask you one last question, Thomas. What difference, Thomas and I have talked a lot about this question, so he's dreading it. What difference would it make if you lived each day with the same intensity and focus on Jesus and others as you did while you were in the Philippines? So the intensity and the feelings that he had in the Philippines, if he were to continue those, to have those here.
I would be exhausted. It's such a hard question because there were some very powerful moments that I didn't know that I could handle. One of the things that I've talked about when I've spoken about this on my own is their comfort rooms and using the restroom there, which is different than my understanding here in the States, and just focusing my attention on all that I have as a person was part of the journey. And like I said, Kim was very good about keeping me grounded. And I was fortunate. We were at the conference, and there was an opportunity to go on a mini international solidarity mission. So our work in the communities was an international solidarity mission, and there was like a mini version where I had the opportunity to go to Community Technical College of Southeastern Mindanao, which was outside Davao City where the conference was being held. And it was a school that the people had created because there was no the education system is not available to everyone, and the people built this school, and it was dirt and grass. There was no play equipment, and we built a playground and a little kitchen, and I painted. That was one of the activities, and that's kind of my name came out of a hat, and I was painting, and just looking out across the different children. They were painting signs for education because they don't give education to everyone. But thinking about the injustices that exist in the world on a regular basis and trying to frame things from a point of justice and I don't know, that I would lead a very different life. I like to think that I make a difference being a teacher. But if I was constantly thinking and focusing on the things that I thought about when I was in the Philippines, I don't know, I wouldn't have a TV, I wouldn't have so much stuff. And it's not that I have a lot of things, it's just I'm very comfortable. And it would be a very different experience. I think I would spend more time with my family. I do a lot with my church, so I don't know if I would do more with my church. I do quite a lot.
He should do more with his church.
I do a lot.
So you'd spend more time with your family.
Yeah, I would spend more time with my family.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about them a lot lately. I have 3 nephews, and they live far northern California, so I don't get to see them very often. I don't know, that's such a difficult question that I'm still thinking about and still trying to discern for myself.
I think that's one of the gifts of this trip for me has been not a get off the plane and unpack your suitcase and unpack all that's happened, but a continually unpacking of this experience. But I'd like to hear if there's any questions from you all, as this is a conversation, sermon, for some of you that have had this experience, whether it be in the Philippines, whether it be in Nigeria. I think there's some relationship that is communal in this. Is this our only microphone? I'm looking at panic behind us. Do you all have any questions for us? None? So that means you're all going next year? I thank you, Thomas, for coming and sharing his experience. I'd just like for us as people here to hear God's prayer, for us to be moved, for us to be challenged, for us to be called to the discomfort, but called for the discomfort of the service of others. By the nature of what we've experienced and who we are and the fact that we're sitting here in this place means that we have been given a gift. And a gift that's not one to feel guilty about or one to feel pain about, but one to give gratitude, and in that gratitude to give a gift back. A gift of love, a gift of peace, and a gift of a voice. One of the things that was difficult there is like, what am I, one little person, to do in this face of all of this bigness? What am I to do about injustice? What am I to do about corruption? What am I to do? And when we sat down and talked to people, they said, hear our story and tell it. That's all I want, is for someone to tell my story. So I tell the stories to you now so that their wishes to be heard around the world are heeded. Their wishes to be known and to be known to us and our Christian community, we lift up. Thanks be to God. Amen.